All right, welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is great. Here to talk about a topic that I've been thinking about for a while, and definitely even like looking at different protocols as they were rising up. But it was definitely that Jesse Weldon iconic essay on progressive decentralization that really got the mind started on it. And how do you really take this protocol from being where it is at the start to being community owned long term? So before we kind of get into it, I'd love to kind of go around. I don't know if anyone here needs a real intro, but yeah, I'd love to know a little bit more specifically about what project you're working on and what are you doing with the project personally. Yeah, go ahead, John.
So hi, I'm John Wu, president of Ava Labs. Ava Labs is the team behind Avalanche, the protocol. You guys probably have heard of us. We're a first layer. We're a next generation blockchain. We do a lot of the things that make the world of decentralization, of DeFi and NFT tokenization work in the sense of the speed TPS is of over 1,000, 5,000. We have less than 1 second finality and a scalable platform where there is really no cost, very little cost at least associated with it. So pretty excited to be here and talk to everyone.
Go ahead, Alexander.
Alex Filatov. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Tone Labs, which is a core developer of the Free Tone network. Also layer one, very decentralized. I guess we'll talk about that. And with some strong performance, last week we beat the record on TPS, 64,000 TPS on open internet. So kind of friends of Avalanche in this new gen blockchain space.
Hey everybody, my name is Jen Sinhaji. I work at the Maker Growth team, which is a business unit directly working for the DAO of MakerDAO. Prior to that, I was at the Maker Foundation, which recently dissolved in July, and spent 3 years there on the business development team. I think most people know Maker, but just as a quick point of reference, we're a DeFi protocol that allows people to permissionlessly borrow DAI against other assets.
My name is Eva Beylin, director of the Graph Foundation and part of the original team that launched the Graph. And for anyone who isn't aware of the Graph, we are a decentralized middleware indexing layer. So whichever layer 1, layer 2, or dApp you're building, you can retrieve data from the blockchain easier with the Graph.
Excellent, thank you. So I want to start this off by, I think we have a pretty good mix here of different projects. We have layer ones, middleware, application protocol, and so I want to, and also at different stages in the project and where they are on their road to decentralization. So I kind of want to get a little bit of an update on what is the state of decentralization of your project and what was the process like getting there? And actually, Jen, I want to start with you because of how long Maker's been along, and the recent announcement that Room put out there that now Maker's fully decentralized. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that means and what it took to get there.
Yeah, so decentralizing and dissolving the foundation was always planned, right? So Maker as a kind of origin story, the co-founder Rune Christensen, kind of created this informal community of people that were excited about this idea he had for a decentralized stablecoin. And, so kind of like through just enthusiasts and people like really interested in this technology kind of started meeting in Reddit and different social channels and talking about like how to do this in a coordinated way. So then from that point, it actually became a foundation which had a very specific strategic objective of bootstrapping the protocol, hiring developers who can actually create and scale these smart contracts and make them secure. Obviously scaling the distribution of DAI, which is a BD function which I was part of at the foundation, then the legal and marketing and all, kind of the components of what you need to launch and scale a business. So this past July, as I mentioned, the Maker Foundation dissolved. So now there are contributors who are still wanting to support the growth of Maker in all different aspects from technical to non-technical can actually be funded directly from the DAO, right? So there's a framework in place where you can actually propose your business idea, have the maker community, weigh in on that and decide if that is something they want. And ultimately, as it moves through a governance process and either passes a executive on-chain vote, yes or no, once it's a yes, all the pieces of that proposal, including budget, immediately go into effect. So we're at this point where we're truly operating as a DAO in the sense that all of the business functions are decentralized, but all are paid by the DAO. So the foundation, I guess I should say, MakerDAO has always been decentralized in its decision making because all parameters to the system have always been, gone through like a decentralized voting process. But now all of these business and operational and technical components that were under the foundation are managed by the community.
Excellent. Eva, coming from middleware protocol, what was that process like? Because the graph launched several years ago, and then only recently, within the last 12 months, launched a token and went through the process setting up the foundation. What was that like, and what other parameters did you have to consider as opposed to something like an application like Maker?
Yeah, so we launched a hosted service first a few years ago in 2019, and the goal was for us to prioritize product market fit because APIs and running servers are still pretty common for even dApp developers. A lot of them are run in-house. There was a bit of a philosophical overturn that we had to go through. So like you mentioned, in December 2020, we launched the decentralized network, and to participate in that network, you have to stake GRT in order to provide services such as indexing services, curating services, so a proper utility token. But I would add that over the last 12 months, we've continued to decentralize our community. So we now have over 3 core dev protocol teams. We have a few other individuals and random teams that contribute where they can, but really the objective being that the graph is a community-driven protocol that is not reliant on one organization or one team.
Excellent. Moving on to John and Alexander, going all the way down to layer 1. We talk about decentralization and in the sense of governance, and obviously want to touch on that as well, but there are other factors that you need to consider as well because you want to be completely community run, even down at the node level. What kind of factors have you been looking into since Avalanche has launched, John? So
Avalanche has only been on the mainnet for about 1 year, so it's younger than most of the players here on the stage. But with that said, a core principle for Avalanche has always been decentralization, and to achieve that without losing any other factors. So obviously with more decentralization, you have more security, but generally speaking, then you'll lose other things like scale and other performance issues. Avalanche is incredibly proud that there's over 1,000 nodes, 1,000 validators out there, growing every single day, and yet it is still one of the most performant blockchains out there. So that was very important. It was a core principle, and we know the benefits, not just security, but also ultimately, we don't want governance in a few hands. And everyone is hopefully, in this room, I guess, believes in decentralization.
Alexander, same question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to repeat what John said. We're kind of trying something similar, 600 plus validators, just over a year as a mainnet, freeton.org. But we kind of decided to go radical on decentralization, and I'll bring 3 aspects, which I think are quite, might be new, kind of new versus what we already discussed at the panel. One is we suggested to the world a concept of end-to-end decentralization. What it means is that decentralization has to come absolutely at all levels. If you think about it, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to come up with totally decentralized consensus protocol, but then all of the transactions go through one server. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. So this concept of end-to-end decentralization, and typically the industry is doing a relatively good job at the lower levels, like consensus, etc., validators, but then everybody struggles towards the front end as you get closer to the user experience. So what we developed is we developed a concept called dbots, which is an interface that allows you to open decentralized applications straight from the browser. And there is no web. The whole thing is absolutely on-chain, web-free. And we actually suggest to launch a web3.org DAO next year. It's actually already live. So that's one, Web3, kind of end-to-end decentralization. The second one at the governance, we decided to go radical on the governance, that anybody can come and suggest a contest on the network, any type of contest. And we decided consciously not to do grants at all, because if you give grants, it's a theoretical point of centralization. Like, I know somebody and I give him a grant. If you do a contest and it's an open contest, it means that anybody can participate. So it kind of removing another point of centralization. And we call it meritocratic token distribution model. And then the last element is on the token itself, kind of anticipating that regulators around the world, and SEC specifically, and we see some signs, will be a little bit more active in the space. We decided not to do a token sale at all. So we sold 0 tokens on the primary market, no ICO, no token sale. 23 initial global governance members took at launch less than 1% of the network worth of tokens, kind of inspired by Satoshi keeping 5% of Bitcoin. And upon vesting, it will be 7%. The other 93% of tokens would be distributed transparently on chain for free, only for free, in exchange for contribution to the ecosystem. Validators, developers, contests, and we have 35 DAOs under Freeton, each attacking a certain segment, including governance. And later this year, we'll move to the governance 2.0 model, I'm hoping this year, where every token holder, even with 1 token, would be able to vote from the browser. So those kind of 3 things are probably quite new in this space.
Excellent. So I think I know your answer to this next question then. Eva, I'm gonna start with you. But how do you define what are the benefits of decentralization? What do they really bring to these projects and in your particular project? And were there any struggles? What were the key struggles and roadblocks that you hit when you're trying to go to a decentralized model? And then on top of that, are there any aspects that maybe work under maybe a little bit more centralization?
Yeah, I'll split this into technological and community decentralization. So off the bat, we very strongly believe a dApp is not decentralized unless the stack is decentralized. And so that includes the server, it includes the storage layer. So for us, the graph is a critical component of making dApps possible and making sure they're sustainable. So we don't have things like Parler being taken down by AWS because you can rely on at least one node operator in the network being willing to serve your data at some cost. So really that's the benefit of decentralization to us, is that your apps can't be taken down, or it would be very hard for your apps to be taken down. From the community perspective, I'd say diversity is the largest benefit. You really don't know what you're building or who you're building it for if you're not getting the feedback and input from a decentralized community. So we have over 160 node operators in our network called indexers. We have over 7,000 delegators and over 2,000 curators. And all of these folks participate in monthly community calls, core dev calls, really providing that input into the community that is largely self-driven. But we're seeing things like core developers getting on a call together and over 4 teams coming to consensus about an architecture decision. And the benefit of that is that we're not then going down a rabbit hole of some architectural design that then could shoot us in the foot later. But we've really done that due diligence with several expert teams up front. Does that answer your question?
And any roadblocks on that way? What was difficult along that way?
Yeah, I think everyone kind of understands decentralization is a bit inefficient to start, so it can be challenging to coordinate. I think we've done a good job so far on the community front, but we're similarly exploring decentralized governance 2.0 and how do you scale this? So you don't want 4 core developer teams or 10. You want thousands of people being able to participate in your protocol if you can. So we're still trying to figure out what that looks like at scale.
Excellent. Jen?
So the first question was?
It was more around what are the benefits of decentralization, and then following up as you're moving towards that path, what were some of the roadblocks and difficulties that you ran into?
Yeah, I would say the benefits, I guess there's 2. There's internal, and of course the biggest is external. So the whole point, I guess, of why we're here is the creation of decentralized applications, right? Because there were problems with the current way people are either excluded or have difficulty accessing different financial platforms and access, really. So, the decentralization, I guess, is like the goal, right? So, more from I guess you could call it a philosophical standpoint or a, way of, making improvements on the current paradigm. Internally, getting there was, like I had mentioned before, bootstrapping the Maker protocol itself and getting it to a point where it could be handed entirely to the community and know that things will, not blow up, right? So working towards having the technical capacity, including things like just technical documentation available, having the frameworks in place for people to propose ideas to the community and to very carefully and objectively pass them or not pass them. So, I would say the journey, and kind of like the work along the way was identifying what needed to be in place in order to successfully kind of like dissolve and have this centralized kind of cushion to say, this is what the strategic vision should be, and this is how we're going to implement it, and this is what we're going to do. So I think the challenge now, and I don't think it'll ever really go away, is human coordination. Because just because you call yourself a DAO, that's not like a magic pill to remove people from having different opinions and making things run smoothly, right? It's just humans at the end of the day. So it sounds like a bird is here. So anytime you can have things in place, forums, public calls, easy ways to share information, I think just helps build the community kind of spirit and ability to like work through those like human bumpy things that are inevitable.
Alexander, so same thing. What were some of the hurdles? Because I know that Ton Labs, when it launched, it really went towards a DAO-centric model. How was it getting off the ground like that? What kind of hurdles did you run into?
Yeah, sure. Just one angle on the benefit. I guess what we're all kind of here at this conference trying to do is eliminate the situation where you have to trade off convenience versus kind of security of your personal data and privacy of your personal data, that you don't have to choose, that you can have convenience with the user experience, user interfaces, as well as having the security and protection of your personal data. The challenges, there were many. Two were already mentioned. One is it's taken off, of course, slower. There are inefficiencies with a decentralized model. Contests are a little bit more complex than grants because grant is very fast. You decide, I give a grant to Eugene and he runs with it. With contest, you need to find consensus on the specifications, and then you need to wait, and it's a few teams, and it's multiple resources. But then, of course, what you have is you have different architectures. We have 4 DEXs, 7 NFT marketplaces, all with totally different design. So it comes with the benefits as well, but inefficient. And then, of course, the most kind of painful thing is when you don't do a token sale at the beginning, which was our conscious choice, because we wanted to stay 100% clean and not being called a security in any contest, even if regulators go radical on what is decentralization, they would still not find a security element because there was no security offering. But then, of course, you don't have liquidity in your token. You need to find organic adoption of your token. Exchanges don't hurry to list. It's only kind of now that we start exchanges coming and bigger as we get natural adoption. So those 3 is what I would mention as inefficiencies.
Wilson, I sat here because I expected to go first in these questions. The last one of the same question is really hard to answer, you know that.
Yeah, well, I was going to mix it up a little bit.
I'll give it a shot if you want.
I was going to throw you a little curveball too if you wanted.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more, but what potential hurdles you might be seeing with the Avalanche now, but also kind of going forward-looking, because I think you're launching on-chain governance soon, and so what are you perceived as potential hurdles? And also, I think one of the interesting choices of what Avalanche did is they kind of did a limited style on-chain governance, where you would only be able to impact certain parameters. Was there a reason behind that particular design?
So, again, Avalanche is incredibly proud that it already has over 1,000 validators. There is a form of governance out there. Security, again, you cannot trade off anything for security. That is number one, and that has been achieved as well. Hurdles really are not necessarily for most people in this room. I think there's a psychology and a belief of having decentralization for most people in this room. The hurdle is going to come from traditional financial services. There are plenty of examples in traditional financial services, in my opinion, that would benefit from a more decentralized situation, and they don't have the mindset for it. I'll give you a simple example. Before the great financial crisis in 2008, swaps were settled effectively in a decentralized manner. Goldman was settled with Lehman. Lehman was settled with Morgan Stanley, and it was one-to-one, point-to-point settlements. The issue was there was a lack of transparency on who owned what, where, how. You didn't know the risk associated with each one of these banks. So the regulators, after 2008, decided to create central clearinghouses for swaps. Then that means CME, LCH, and ICE also became not just exchanges, but clearinghouses to take on that visibility so that there's less risk of default out there. If blockchain were prevalent back in 2008 and it was properly decentralized, I think everyone in this room will agree that having 1,000 nodes out there is better than consolidating it into 3. So in this example, traditional finance went from decentralized to actually centralized to solve some of the security and risk issues because this technology wasn't around. We can reverse that.
I'd say that's a good answer. All right. So next one, I kind of want to talk about what would be, as you're kind of like looking to transition to those next steps of decentralization. So hearing some that are early in the stages, some that are much later in the stages. What was the point when you realized like, this is a good time to make that transition? What were those like those milestones or data points that you were looking for? Was it purely technical, or was it also on the community side, and whether they were ready to start adopting it? And John, I'll let you kick us off.
The answer is both. You have to monitor, again, security versus functionality, but also the community is very important and their voice needs to be heard. So if you don't give them that, you will not make your progress towards the ultimate goal of decentralization. You can't alienate your community. I think everyone on this panel has done a good job of not doing that, not alienating their community. So the answer is both.
Alexander?
So for us, we decided from the very beginning, since launch in May last year, that we would move to the governance 2.0 eventually, which is not easy, where all token holders vote, because otherwise it's kind of you're not fully decentralized, because it's still, if it's 23 or 31 global governance members voting on important network decisions, it's still not enough. You need all stakeholders to be able to express their vote, and because then they would feel real and passionate members of the ecosystem. So it's very important psychologically to engage more and more people and eventually achieve kind of a network effect.
Jen, were there any particular milestones that you were hitting along the way that you were keeping an eye on as Maker moved along?
We started talking about what dissolving would look like a good year and a half ago in a very kind of consistent way. It had always been in the back of our minds, and it was always like the known end goal. And actually, I remember like the first couple of weeks when I started at Maker, and my boss at the time, he referenced, he's just like, yeah, so when we dissolve, if we do our jobs right, we'll dissolve and we put ourselves out of a job. And I just remember thinking like, this sounds very strange, especially as somebody that just joined this organization. But that was kind of it. Like if we did our jobs right and moved the protocol to a mature enough level where it was, kind of running and able to be like supported by new participants and contributors, that was kind of like the signal as to we've arrived at this point where a foundation is really not needed anymore. So there were some technical, milestones, I think, that had been in place by, the founder and also like the engineer saying like, let's finish this work. One of the things was Liquidations 2.0, which launched back in, I think, early spring. So that was kind of like, there was just a few technical things and overall robustness of the community being able to interact with themselves and have the decentralized governance frameworks in place that signified that the time has come.
Excellent. Eva, what gave the team the confidence to launch everything in the foundation, the token, everything back in December and move towards that more decentralized model?
Yeah, so I agree with John. It's definitely both technical and community. And for us, it culminated in a testnet and a curator program. So we ran a node operator testnet for about 6 months. That was largely to get a lot of the existing node operators in the Ethereum community comfortable with running our hardware, us learning about the network and what was ready, what wasn't. And then also getting that mind power really as part of the graph. I would say our community is really one of our strengths. And that comes from having spent several months with them, teaching them and educating about our network. And then on the curator program side, that was a lot more focused on non-technical education. So we have a few non-technical roles on our network, and that was a bit of a philosophical shift. So we also spent about 6 months teaching folks, how you could participate as a non-technical, non-developer in our community. And then at the end of that, we launched the network. But I would say we're still progressively decentralizing. So even the first 6 months of the network, we focused largely on bootstrapping indexers. So that was helping them, whether that was parameterize, price discovery in the two-sided query market that they're operating in, whatever it might be. And then we only launched subgraph migration, so really launching curation full force in July. So we're still continuing that process because we don't think you can necessarily succeed by decentralizing all in one go.
Excellent. So we have about a minute left, and Eva, I'll start with you since you just ended, but what's left then? What are the next steps?
I'd say the next step is this decentralized governance 2.0. So we have a graph council that represents all the different stakeholders of our network, but we're looking to expand that long term to include more folks who are participating in the network. And similarly with the foundation, such as Maker did, dissolving that into a larger DAO. And so we're in the design process there.
Excellent. John, what's next for Avalanche?
Great, I get to go second. Similar to what Eva just said, continue to build out decentralization. Our goal is also, we talked about community and technology. Well, one of the benefits that's on Avalanche is the cost of the hardware and the cost to actually be a validator is quite low. So they can literally be one and the same as opposed to requirements of institutions to come in and be your validator. We want the community to participate and ultimately also governance 2.0.
Excellent. Alexander?
We're inviting everybody to join the Web3.org DAO initiative to eliminate the web, which is a point of centralization, potentially.
And Jen, is Maker at its final form?
Yeah, we're full DAO, living, breathing. So we've, rolled off the cliff, and it's been going really well. So we're seeing the formation of all these different core units that are coming and proposing their business ideas to be funded by the DAO. We recently added vote delegation to make it easier for Maker holders to delegate their votes to somebody and just enhance that participation through those types of solutions. And then, we've been, the ability to kind of directly work with the community has really accelerated the pace at which, particularly with our growth team, that we could share feedback on things that are, product ideas that would be in demand or of interest, bring those to the community, just coordinate across all these different core units and much more quickly than in the past, actually, launch new things and new features and iterations. So that's been really exciting. So I think this year post dissolving is going to be a really fascinating one. I think there's just going to be a lot more creativity and aspects of Maker that haven't been born yet.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the next stage in everyone's protocol. Thanks for joining us. I think we're out of time, a little over, but really, really appreciate it. And if anyone has any other questions, I'm sure you can track them down outside. All right, thanks.
Thank you.